Hi, this is Mr. McConley, and this is BKW Intro to Agriculture class. And today we're looking at a chainsaw. The customer complained that it would start and it would idle, but when they would give it the throttle, it would kind of bog down, just go boo, 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 and it wouldn't really rev up. I gave it a test run, and that's exactly what it did. I could get it to run sometimes, but not very strong. It was running pretty weak. Definitely couldn't cut any wood with it. And this is a new, I don't know how old it is, maybe a year or two old, 211C steel chainsaw. So it seems weird that it wouldn't be running. And it seems weird that maybe, one of your first thoughts might be that the carburetor was dirty or whatever, but I saw that this new and hasn't been used much. It doesn't seem likely. So you start going, here's some basic things you should check for with a chainsaw. First of all, what's the fuel look like? Is this fuel new, clean? And I know that the customer actually was uncertain of that, so they actually went ahead and they drained the fuel out and made some fresh new fuel, non-ethanol fuel with the premix and put new fuel in it. So I'm confident that the fuel is clean and ready to go. But inside the tank here, there's another little device that I need to pull out here. And what this is, I'll get it out and then you can see what I'm looking at. This thing right here is a slippery little thing. This is the fuel pickup. And this is what pulls the fuel out of the tank and routes it up into the carburetor. Now, if this were all filled with junk, because that's a screen right there, so if that were all filled with junk and dirty, that would be another suspicion, and I would probably replace this. You're also looking for, on the fuel line, any cracks, or if something has started to pull loose, because it would be sucking air and not sucking fuel. But this fuel line looks really pretty new, pretty good to go, and this is very clean. They've kept it all clean inside the tank, so I said, that can't be it. All right. The next thing I go ahead and look at, or that I'm looking for, is any other loose fuel lines. And most of these fuel lines would be found up underneath in this area where the fuel lines come up and connect to the carburetor. Kind of hard to see, probably almost impossible on camera, but when I got in there and I shined a flashlight in there, I could see that those fuel lines weren't cracked or loose or anything like that. The next thing you really want to check into is, this is your air filter, and the air has to be able to readily pass right through this, and this shouldn't have a layer of dust, and so I vacuumed it off and dusted it off, and it was pretty clean anyway, so I wasn't terribly concerned. You're also looking in this area. This is all the intake for the carburetor, and you're trying to see if there's any dust or filth in there. Didn't see anything, looked pretty clean. All right, check that off the list. Next thing I took a look at, although I didn't really suspect this to be the problem, but I did want to look at the spark plug. So I pulled the spark plug, unscrewed the spark plug with the tool, loosened it up, take it out, and I looked at that spark plug to see the color. It should be a brownish color. If it's more towards the white, like a really light brown, that means it's running kind of lean, it doesn't have enough fuel. If it's really black, that means it's running kind of rich, too much fuel. Either way is not very good, but it looked to be right at that right color range. It looked a good color to me. I was satisfied that that spark plug seemed to be probably working correctly, so I kind of checked that off the list. Now, the last thing that I really was suspicious of, and it turned out to be the problem, I think, is, we'll see, is the actual muffler itself. Can you see? So I took the liberty of taking the first muffler screw out, and I'm taking out the other one right now. These are a star type of bit. So this pulls off like this. Now, one thing before I go too much further, before I forget, when you look at these at first, they looked like that, although these things were pushed in tight. And there was one in each one of these. I couldn't for the life of me figure out what in the heck they were, if I needed a special tool. Just didn't understand what they were. But basically they're just protective plugs, I guess, so a typical homeowner doesn't try to take the muffler off. They don't want you messing with it. And once I figured out that you could just kind of pry on these a little bit and they would pop out, that's what they did. And they popped out, and underneath you had your 2 screws that have a star head on them. All right, so we remove this muffler. This is just like a heat shield that goes on the back and actually has the muffler gasket also. But what turned out to be the problem is this little thing right here, and I'll see if I can pull it out with my fingers. Kind of tight, but it comes out. Okay. So what this is here, this is a spark arrestor screen, and right now it's cleaned. So if you look at it, can you see through it right there? When I took this off, it was so black it just looked like a solid piece of metal. I couldn't see anything through it. I took a wire brush and kept cleaning it until it's pretty clean. I can see air through it. Now, I believe this to be the problem. Since that was so plugged up, I believe the air couldn't actually escape from the motor, and that's what was causing it to run poorly. So that just kind of jams back in there. And it's a spark arrestor, so if you're running and you get some sparks and heat that are coming out here, they won't start things on fire. That screen will block the hot pieces of carbon that are escaping. So that should be cleaned up. Time to put it back together here. Let's stand it on end. I put my heat shield like this. Drop my carburetor like this. Hopefully, if I'm lucky, I can get these to line up fairly readily. That seems to be threading. Drop the other one. Alright, this one's threading in now. Starting to line up. Now you want these to be pretty snug by the time they're tightened down. Not ridiculous because you don't want to strip them or anything. But if they're not tight with the expansion and the contraction of the heat of the exhaust on the muffler, it's going to come loose. So, you know, I'm putting some pretty good tightness on these back and forth to ensure that they're equally tightened. I'm pretty satisfied that those are good to go. I'm going to take these little suckers and put them in there. Now they're not quite tight enough yet, so we'll take a hammer here, just a little okay. And that's what I was, just to go back to my other point, this is what I was seeing when I was first looking at the muffler, and I was thinking, how the heck does that come off of there? So now it makes a little bit more sense to me. Last thing I want to do is put the cover back on here. This down, that. Feels pretty good. So, hopefully, we've done everything right. We should be able to fire it up. Let's give it a try. Now this is actually a special saw that has this easy pull. So you'll watch the way I pull it, it looks a lot different than you might have ever seen another saw start, because all I do is this. Well, seems to be running strong. Sounds great. I think we fixed the problem. So it turned out to be carbon on the exhaust on the muffler. So my advice to the customer is going to be run it like you stole it. Don't let it idle for long periods of time and run it at low speeds. It just plugs it right up. For today, this is Mr. McConley and BKW Intro to Agriculture.